the propaganda for this forum says that nothing can be regarded as a more existential threat than climate change. Well, I can think of one rather obvious existential threat which has killed, according to The Economist, some 25 million people just in the last 2 years. And that is, of course, the Chinese virus. So no, there are plenty of real existential threats. And had we spent a little more on those and a little less on what I shall show to be the non-existential threat of climate change, then we wouldn't be in the economic mess that we're in now. And let me first of all say there is support for the catastrophist position in the peer-reviewed literature. Here is a paper from Environmental Research Letters in 2013 by researchers from the University of Queensland. And they said that they had reviewed, bless their little cotton socks, 11,944 papers on climate science and related topics. And that they said that 97.1% of those papers had explicitly, in terms, endorsed the proposition that global warming is chiefly anthropogenic. So in those days they used the word man-made. And that was their statement of the consensus proposition. There in red, global warming is chiefly anthropogenic. But it doesn't say a word about tipping points or ice disappearing or things being dangerous. The only thing the consensus proposition actually says, according to this paper, which is the largest sample of its kind ever conducted, is that global warming is chiefly anthropogenic. But let us look a little bit further into this paper, which received enormous publicity. For instance, sorry, how can I go back on this? I try that. Mr. Obama, on his Twitter feed, when that paper of 2013 came out, said 97% of scientists agree global warming is real, man-made, and dangerous. But you've just seen the definition of the consensus position on the previous slide. Not a word about danger in it. And this is the bait and switch by which the political forces behind this, which I will talk a little bit more about later, have managed to convince a lot of people who frankly ought to know better that global warming is a threat, when in fact it's very likely to prove to be a net benefit. Now let us look at this paper a little bit in more detail. Here is a paper published later that year in the Journal of Science and Education, after peer review, by Legates et al. And I must confess that I was not only one of the authors of this paper, but I also did the counting and reading of the 11,944 papers to find out what had really happened. And I discovered that the authors of the original paper from Australia had themselves listed only 65 papers, or 0.5% of the original 11,944, as having explicitly endorsed the consensus position. Well, we then read all 64 of those papers, or 65, and we found that only 41, or 0.3%, not 97.1%, 0.3%, had actually endorsed even that milquetoast consensus proposition that global warming of recent decades was mostly man-made. Now, how many of you have seen this paper and its result reported in any mainstream news medium anywhere? I see no hands. Now, given the intensity of the debate about global warming, is it not interesting that the paper saying that 97.1% of scientists had said they supported the consensus position was widely reported, and it was mentioned by ministers in the British Parliament and in many other parliaments. It was mentioned by Mr. Obama in his Twitter feed. Nobody mentioned this result, because we went and did what scientists, sir, are supposed to do. We did not simply believe the propaganda. We went and checked meticulously and boringly. I had to write a computer program to read down their list of the papers because it was in comma delimited format, which is extremely irritating. And once I'd done that, and I got this result, 64 or 65 papers, I thought I'd programmed it wrong. So then I had to do it again, this time using the search function in the form of Microsoft Word that deals with text files, which is called Notepad. And I had to go through by hand and check it by hand, and it came out the same. Now, anybody could have done that, but it was only we who did it. And when we had done it and reported it, nobody in the mainstream news media wanted to know. And that should concern us all, because what it means is that freedom of speech is being shut down, and you cannot have a proper academic discussion on matters like this if a result as appallingly, deliberately bad as that can be publicised everywhere, and the correction to it that you see on the screen now doesn't get any coverage at all.